If you really want to get a handle on modern Iran, you can't just look at the last few decades. You have to go way, way back. In this explainer, we're going to journey from the world's very first superpower all the way to the 20th century revolution that really forged the nation we see today. Let's dive in.
And there's a really good reason we're starting so far back. The philosopher Hegel, he had this incredible phrase for the Persians. He called them the first historical people. What did he mean by that? Well, he was saying they were the first to build a true state, with a global vision, not just a random collection of places they conquered. And that idea, that deep-rooted, influential civilization, is absolutely central to our story.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with that ancient empire. Then we'll look at how Persian culture managed to survive centuries of invasion. And from there, we'll zoom into the 20th century, focusing on a really pivotal coup for oil, the revolution it eventually sparked, and the legacy that's still with us today.
All right, let's kick things off with that first superpower. The incredible resilience of Iranian identity really starts with this amazing template for governance that was created over 2,500 years ago.
So just take a look at this timeline for a second. It really shows you the incredible depth of history we're dealing with here. Long before the famous Persian Empire, you had civilizations like the Elamites building cities. Then the Medes united the Iranian tribes, and Cyrus the Great built on that foundation to create the Achaemenid Empire, the world's first real superpower. And his model was so successful that even after it fell, the Sasanian Empire revived it centuries later, which really cemented this powerful sense of national identity. Now, the empire that Cyrus built, the Achaemenid Empire, it wasn't just big, it was totally revolutionary for its time. It was the first empire to be explicitly, religiously tolerant. It governed dozens of different peoples, not just with brute force, but with a super sophisticated legal and administrative system. The famous Cyrus Cylinder is considered by many to be the very first declaration of human rights, freeing slaves, respecting local traditions. It's amazing. This model of decentralized control, all connected by things like the Royal Road, was really the secret to its success.
So, we all know empires rise and fall, right? That's just history. But what happens when the political empire is gone, but the culture is so strong it doesn't just survive, it actually changes the people who conquered it? That brings us to our second chapter, the incredible story of Persian resilience.
Then, in 330 BC, the inevitable happened. A new military genius, you've definitely heard of him, Alexander the Great, comes sweeping in from the west. The Achaemenid political machine was defeated, and its grand capital, Persepolis, was burned to the ground. The empire, as it had been, was over.
And here's where it gets really fascinating. This illustrates the point perfectly. Alexander and his generals, they were great warriors, but they weren't administrators. They pretty quickly realized that the Persian system of government, its taxes, its roads, it was just too effective to get rid of, so they kept it. The Greeks were now ruling from Persian thrones using Persian methods.
Okay, now let's fast forward almost 1,000 years. A second, even more transformative conquest happens. In the 7th century, Arab armies, fired up by the new faith of Islam, conquered the Sasanian Persian Empire. And this time, it wasn't just a political change. It brought a new religion, a new language for scripture, and a whole new social order.
But then, just like with the Greeks, something incredible happened. As the new Islamic Caliphate got bigger and more powerful, it started to look more and more, Persian. Persian bureaucrats were the ones running the administration. Persian science and philosophy, we're talking everything from algebra to medicine, became the cornerstones of the Islamic Golden Age. This process was so profound, it actually has a name: Persianization.
And this didn't just happen by accident. There was a conscious effort called the Shubiya movement, led by Persian intellectuals inside the caliphate. Through poetry and essays, they basically argued that, sure, Islam is for everyone, but Persian culture is superior. They made sure to preserve their pre-Islamic stories and traditions, ensuring that the Persian identity wasn't erased, but actually became a central pillar of the new Islamic world.
So this strong cultural identity gets another massive layer in the 1500s. And this is a pivotal shift. For centuries, Persia had been mostly Sunni, like the rest of the region. But the new Safavid dynasty made Twelver Shia Islam the official state religion. This was a huge decision that created a truly distinct Iranian national identity, setting it apart from its Sunni rivals like the Ottoman Empire and forging the religious character that defines Iran to this very day.
Okay, so that distinct Shia identity really solidifies over the next few hundred years, carrying Iran right into the modern era. And now, we're going to take a huge leap forward to the 20th century.
Because this is where Iran's long history of national pride slams right into the new global politics. And it all comes down to one thing: oil.
Okay, so here's the deal. Iran had these massive oil reserves, right? But they were all controlled by one British company, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, or AIOC. And the terms? They were just awful for Iran. So in 1951, the democratically elected parliament, led by a really popular nationalist named Mohammad Mossadegh, voted to take control of their own resources. For them, it was about national sovereignty. For the British, it was an absolute disaster.
So this table kind of lays out all the key players and what was driving them. You had Mossadegh, who just wanted Iran to profit from its own oil. Then there was the Shah, Iran's monarch, who was getting a little nervous about how popular Mossadegh was becoming. Britain? They just wanted their oil company back, period. And the United States? Well, it was the height of the Cold War, and they were terrified that all this chaos would lead to a communist takeover, which would hand Iran and all its oil over to the Soviet Union.
But here's the thing, and this is so important. The coup almost didn't happen at all. The Truman administration in the U.S. was dead set against it. They were worried about the consequences of overthrowing a democratic government. But in 1953, the Eisenhower administration came in. They had a much tougher stance on communism, and, well, the British convinced them it was necessary. That change in the White House was the final piece that made the coup possible.
So the plan, which the CIA codenamed Operation Ajax, was like something out of a spy movie. It wasn't a big military invasion. Instead, it was all about destabilization. They launched a propaganda campaign to paint Mossadegh as corrupt and a communist sympathizer. They paid off key military officers and politicians. They even hired protesters to create riots in the streets. The whole goal was to create enough chaos to make it look like a popular uprising, giving them the justification to remove him. And well, the coup worked. Mossadegh was arrested, and the Shah was put back on the throne. But this short-term win for the West kicked off a chain reaction that would have absolutely devastating long-term consequences, leading directly to the Iranian Revolution just 26 years later. And we really have to understand this. The 1953 coup didn't just swap out a prime minister. It totally killed Iran's experiment with democracy. The Shah, who had actually fled the country for a bit, was brought back not as a constitutional monarch, but as a full-blown autocrat, his power now guaranteed by the US and Britain.
So the Shah's rule was this huge contradiction. On the one hand, he pushed for rapid modernization. He promoted what some historians call state feminism, advancing women's rights from the top down, partly to show how modern his country was becoming. And he was, of course, a very close ally of the United States. But on the other hand, all this progress came at a steep price. Any and all political dissent was ruthlessly crushed by his infamous and frankly brutal secret police, SAVAK.
And this quote, this gets right to the heart of the legacy of 1953. Before the coup, a lot of Iranians actually saw the United States as a positive force, different from the old European colonial powers like Great Britain. The coup completely shattered that image. From that moment on, for many, many Iranians, America was just another imperial power, meddling in their country for its own selfish reasons. And this is probably the most brilliant and tragic unintended consequence of the Shah's repression. He successfully jailed or exiled anyone who opposed him, the nationalists, the socialists, the liberals. He wiped out all the secular opposition. But in doing that, he created a political vacuum. And the one institution he couldn't completely control, the mosque. It became the only place left where people could gather and organize, which meant that almost by default, the clergy became the leaders of the resistance.
I mean, you can literally draw a straight line from 1953 to 1979. The anger that started with the coup just simmered for decades. A fiery cleric, Ayatollah Khomeini, became the main voice against the Shah's pro-Western government and his autocratic rule. By the late 70s, that simmering anger just boiled over into massive protests that paralyzed the whole country. The Shah's powerful regime just crumbled. He fled, and Khomeini returned from exile to create the Islamic Republic.
Okay, so where does all of this leave us? What's the lasting legacy of this incredibly long and complicated history? In our final section, we'll see how these ancient patterns and 20th century events are still shaping Iran right now.
Hey, remember that huge decision the Safavids made way back in the 1500s? Well, this chart is the direct result. Today, Iran is overwhelmingly Shia Muslim. That religious identity continues to define its culture, its laws, and its very unique place in the mostly Sunni Middle East.
So, the 1979 revolution didn't just create another government.
It created a totally unique system based on Ayatollah Khomeini's theory of velayat-e-faqih, or governance of the jurist. What this basically means is that the ultimate political power doesn't rest with an elected president or a parliament. It rests with a top-ranking cleric, the supreme leader, who has the final say on everything.
And finally, let's talk about the name. You hear Persia, you hear Iran. What's the difference? Well, back in 1935, the Shah's father officially asked the world to start using the country's native name, Iran. So today, Iran is the official name of the modern country, while Persia is often used to talk about that deep, rich, and ancient cultural heritage we've been exploring.
So let's just end with one final thought here. The 1953 coup in Iran was one of the first major covert ops for the CIA. That model was later used in other countries, and the intense anti-American feeling it created in Iran led directly to the 1979 revolution, the hostage crisis, and a relationship that's still incredibly tense today. So it really leaves us with a question. How much of our current global landscape is still living in the shadow of that one week in August 1953?